Okay, for those of you that are going to take the test today, let's review just a little bit before we do the test. Okay, we started off with adding, and we just talked about that if there are numbers that add up to 10, you can group them together. And so 7 and 3 is 10, 8 and 2 is 10, so 10 and 10 is 20, plus 5 is 25. The best way to check addition is to do it a different way. Like if you added bottom to top, then go top to bottom or whatever. Subtraction, you just have to be careful when you are subtracting, when you borrow one, to make sure you put down what it is and then the one that you borrow. And then to check it, you add these two together and see if they add up to your top number. Okay. Then, of course, with multiplication, your main thing is to keep your rows straight and give yourself enough room. Now, when we take the test, make sure that you do your work like on another sheet of paper, and then you can copy your answer on your test. And but show me both things so that I can give you partial credit. Like if you did everything right all the way down to a particular place, I might just take off a little bit instead of the whole thing. Now, division gives us the most trouble, and I want to do a division problem, but division is always the hardest for everybody. Okay, now it depends on whether you are working a problem where you're going to leave it as a remainder or whether you're going to add a decimal and some zeros. So always look at your directions to see what you're supposed to do. Now, if you have 324, it won't go into 1, 6, or 8, but it will go into 1,689. So I always just put a little dot up there or something so I'll know where to put my answer. Then you break it down. Now, you may have a different way of dividing because I've taught a lot of different students from other countries, and their division looks different. Almost everything else in math looks the same. So you just do it the way you're accustomed to dividing and don't worry about it. Okay, now when you take 324 into 1,689, that's kind of confusing to your brain. But if you break it down into 3 into 16, that makes it a lot easier problem. And that goes 5 times. It will either go 5 or it will be 1 less than that most of the time. So let's try 5 and see what happens. So 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 2 is 10. Plus 2 is 12. Carry your 1. 5 times 3 is 15. Plus 1 is 16. So I had no clue because I haven't worked this problem before, but it worked out by breaking it down into a smaller problem. That gives you a good idea of when to do it. Then you subtract. If this number is smaller than your divisor, then you know you did it right. If it's larger than your divisor, then you pick a bigger number. Okay, so we will bring down the 2. 324 into 692. 3 will go into 6 2 times. So we'll try 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so it worked on this one too. So you can't take 8 from 12, so you borrow 1. And so that gives you 44. Now in division, you have a lot of subtraction. And as I said earlier, whenever there's subtraction, be careful because that's usually where you're going to miss it. Okay, always double check to make sure you did it right. Now 324 will not go into 44. So if it says leave your answer with a remainder, you would put remainder 44. If it says round to the nearest tenth or something like that, then that means add a decimal and a 0 and bring it down. So you got 324 into 440, which will go 1 time. Okay. Make sure I didn't make any mistakes where we won't go through all this for nothing. Okay, and 324 won't go into 116, so you will have to bring down another 0. Okay, and then divide it into 3 into 11, so that goes like 3 times. So 3 times 4 is 12, 6, 7, 2 times 3 is 9. Okay, now, so if you're rounding to the nearest tenth, you find tenths place, look at the number behind it. If it's 5 or more, you go up. If it's not, you just drop it off. So your answer would be 52.1 if it was rounded to the nearest tenth. If it was with a remainder, it would be 52, remainder 44. Okay, but be careful. You notice when I was doing this one, they got kind of out of order there, So just be careful when you're dividing. Okay, and then we did, let's see, we had like multiplication and division. We had place value. And remember, we looked at it where all the things on the right of the decimal are fractions of a whole. So you've got tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, and so forth and so on. Over here, there are whole numbers, and the decimal, we always call it an and. Okay. And then we had rounding, which we've already talked about. Okay. If you have to round to the nearest hundredth, you just find hundredths place and look at the next number. 5 or more, you go up. If it's less than 5, you drop it off. Then we had adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing decimals. And if you're adding them, you keep them in a straight line. If you're subtracting, you keep them in a straight line. If you're multiplying, you go ahead and multiply as normal. And then if this is one place and another place, 1 and 1 is 2. So you start on the right-hand side and move it back over. Now what we're doing for these first 2 weeks, we're not using a calculator. And then after today, then you will be able to use a calculator on everything. Okay? Okay. All right. If you've got a decimal when you're dividing, remove your decimal from your divisor by moving it over how many places. If this is 2 places, you move it 2 here and you move this one 2. And what you're really doing is multiplying both numbers by 100. And then if you want to, you can rewrite the problem or erase it. I'm having to use an ink pen up here where you can see what I'm doing, but I always use pencil, and I want all work in pencil here.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick? If there is a decimal, like if it said, like for instance, like 0.23, and then
divided into
the same number, but it has no decimal.
Okay.
What do you do?
All right. If you have something like that.
Yeah.
I
don't know
decimal.
I'm just curious.
The decimal is always behind it. When it's a whole number, like a 120, your decimal point is right there. Because when we were talking about numbers here, all these are whole numbers,
yes,
and everything past it is a fraction. So any whole number, the decimal is behind it. So it would be there.
Okay.
And then you move that to, move that to. Good question, though.
You can add zeros to it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that with multiplying too?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. What do you want? Like a 3.2 times, say, a 6 or something like that? Is that what you mean? Or
Let's get nasty with it. 0.23 times like 724.2.
okay, 724.2.
Yeah.
Okay. I would put my 724.2 on top and my 0.23 down here. Okay, like this. Okay, all you have to do is multiply as normal. This is one place past the decimal, this one is 2. So you'd move it at the bottom 3 places from the right.
Gotcha.
So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7, 3 times 7 is 21. 4, 8, 4, 14.
However many places you move your decimal is how many you put it back.
Yeah, that's like 1 there, 2 there, total of 3. So you'd start over here and move it 3 places.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Now, next was fractions. We had to write equivalent fractions first. Like 2/3 is equal to how many sixths? Okay. So you would say 3 root 1 is 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. That's an equivalent fraction. Okay, the reason we did this is because later the problems you had to have it in this form instead of that form. Okay, we also learned how to put things in lowest terms. Let's say we had 20 over 24. Now, you try to find the largest number that will go into both of them. And sometimes all you see is a 2. So you can do like that. But then that's not quite low enough.
6.
And see, someone else may have seen a number that would go into both of them first. But anyway, this is lowest terms. They always want your answer in lowest terms. Okay. We had mixed fractions, like 1 3/5. And they might say, make this an improper fraction. By improper, we mean the numerator is larger than the denominator. So 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3, 8/5. Sometimes they want it this way, sometimes they want it that way. Okay. Then, next we did, adding fractions. And you have to make sure that you have a common denominator, like 2/7 plus 3/7. We can add that together and get 5/7. Okay. Now, if your answer came out to be 9/7 on a particular problem, that's improper. They don't like the answer left that way. So you just divide the denominator into the numerator, and so 1 2/7 on that one. Okay, let's suppose we have one with unlike denominators. This one is 3/5, this one is 2/10. So we can see that both of those will go into 10. If you can't come up with a number, multiply them together. Okay, because we could have used a 50, but it makes it a whole lot bigger problem. So 5 going to 10 2 times 3 is 6, and that's just 2/10. So 6/10 plus 2/10 is 8/10. But 8/10 is not in lowest terms, so we divide 2 into 8 4 times, 2 going to 10 5 times. If you have 3 different numbers, you've got to find something that they will all go into, and then add them. Okay? If you have a mixed number, like 2 2/3 and 1 1/6, you have to change these into a common denominator. So I just move the whole numbers over. And I said 3 going to 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4 and 1 6. So 4 6 and 1 6 is 5 6. And then add these together. And there's your answer. But suppose it came out where it was 3 and 7 6. Okay. This is improper, so they don't like it like that. So change 7 6 into 1 and 1 6. You already had 3, so now you have 4 and 1 6. Okay. If you have to subtract, same thing, just get a common denominator, move your whole numbers over where you don't forget them, and then 3 going to 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 6 minus 1 6 is 3 6. 4 minus 1 is 3, so that's 3 1/2. Okay, sometimes it takes 2 steps. Okay, here we use 15 for our common denominator. So 3 going to 15 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 going to 15 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. Now, this was a 6 and 5/15 minus 2 and 12/15. You can't take 12 from 5. So you have to borrow one. And the one that you borrow, you change it into whatever the denominator is over itself. Because that's like having a whole pie. If it's into 4 fourths, okay, that's the same thing as 1. If it was divided into thirds, 3 thirds is also equal to 1. So, the one that you borrow, change it into whatever your denominator is. Now, you have 15. You already had 5, so now you have 20. And then you subtract and you get 8. So, 3 and 8/15. Okay, any questions on that? Alright, then we had multiplication. Oh, let's look at this one. If you have a number like an 8 minus 1 1/2. Okay. And this one, you've got to cut the pie up before you can take a half a piece out of it or whatever. So, if this is halves, you borrow 1, leaves it a 7. The one that you borrow, you change it into halves. So, 2 halves minus 1/2 is a half. 7 minus 1 is a 6. So, All right, multiplication, your rule is multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, and then simplify. If you can cancel something like this one, those would cancel out. So you have a 1 up here and a 3 down there. Here's another one, 1/3 times 15. 3 1/15 5 times. That's a 5 over 1 or a 5. If you have a mixed number, you change it into an improper. Multiply across and then reduce. Okay. Division, if you know how to multiply, all you have to do is turn the second number upside down, which is called the reciprocal, and multiply. So every division problem is a multiplication problem. So take 1 over 4, flip it upside down, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 1 is 3, and then make it a mixed number. Over here, if you have a mixed number divided by a mixed number, change them both into improper. Flip the second one. See if anything will cancel. Then 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 8 is 16. Okay. Now, if I'm going too fast, I'm trying not to drag you down with things that you already know, but I want to make sure that you understand, what we got to do. Okay, the next part was on percent, which means per hundredth. Okay, so change these decimals to percents. If you've got a 0.20, that means nothing to your brain. But if you say 20 hundredths, because this is tenths, hundredths place, 20 hundredths means that's a fraction. And then you can move it 2 places to the right because percent means per hundred. So that's 20%. Now you say, I can't ever remember whether I'm moving it to the right or the left or whatever. Always use 50%. 50% is a half as a fraction. That's also 0.5. And that way, if you just write it down, you'll know which way you're supposed to go in case you get confused because you're nervous on a test. Now, if you've got 0.10, which is the same thing as 10 hundredths, and percent means hundredths, move it 2 places to the right, 2 places to the right, 2 places to the right. Okay. And you can have percents more than 100%. Okay. Well, let's see. All right. Next, we had changed the percent to a decimal. So if you're going backwards on these. Percent means 2 places. So 20%, you go backwards to 0.20. Same thing, 50% means 0.50. So go back and use 50%. That'll help you. Now, if you have one that has a decimal in it like this, 33.5%, drop the percent off, move it 2 places, so 0.335. If it has a fraction, change your fraction to a decimal first. Okay. Then move it 2 places to the left, so 0.275 or 275 thousandths. This one, 33.33%. 1/3 is 0.33333 or 0.3 with a bar. Okay. Now, then you want it as a decimal. As a decimal. So we have to move it over. So 0.333. And if that one's repeating, that means all of them are repeating. So just 0.3 with a bar. Then the next thing we did was change from a fraction to a decimal or percent, or that you might have in a decimal form, you need to put it over here or over there. Okay, so if you've got a fraction, 1/2, you already know that's 0.5. You divide 2 into 1, okay? And that's 0.5 or 5/10 as a percent. Move it 2 places, 50%. 1/4, okay, I think we started with 0.25 or 25 hundredths. 25 hundredths reduces down to 1/4, okay? 25 hundredths, percent means hundredths, so move it 2 places over. So you're just going back and forth. But if you've got a 1/4, remember to change that into a decimal first and then move it. Okay. Let's see. All right, then we had application problems, which was at set 5. Okay, we talked about different words that mean to add: total, add, combine, more, and subtract. Sometimes means less, difference, left, and sometimes they use more on that too. How many more than this one, or whatever. Multiply, your main word is of. Okay, they might use product or times, and the main word for divide is per. And you had a lot of those on that set 5, to work on. And it's really hard sometimes to tell if you're supposed to multiply or to divide. But when you get your answer, I always see, does this make any sense at all? Sometimes you'll be able to reason and say, no, I need to do something else. Other times you go, I don't know, and throw up your hands.
In is one of those tricky words.
What?
In.
Uh-huh.
Figuring out, do I multiply in or divide in?
In.
What, that
Uh-huh.
it always throws me for a loop.
Right, yes. It's hard to decide. And it's like if it's divide, if it's like miles per hour, miles divided by the hours. So the top one goes under here, miles per hour. But that is always a tricky thing. You're not sure which one to use. Now another thing we did was tax. Let's suppose the tax rate is 8%. Okay. First, you have to change it into a decimal before you can do anything with it. If you bought something for $17.85 and it was 8% tax, you multiply this times this, and it comes out to 1.4280. Okay. Now, this is money, so they're always going to round up. So 1.43 or $1.43 is your tax. So your total was this, you add the tax to it. Okay. Now, and so we had several problems like that. Now, any particular problem that was on any of those that you need to see worked that you can think of? How far did you get on 5?
It's number 10.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Any particular questions on anything? Okay. Anybody? Okay. All right. Listen, since this took so long before we got started, go ahead and take just a minute or two break. Get some water, go to the bathroom, whatever, and then come back and then we'll do the test. Okay. Not a 10, 15 minutes, just a minute.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Do you have time outside of class?
Okay. Sometimes I do.
Because I would like to be home because I have no clue what you are saying.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm 30 right now, and it's more than 10 or 15 years I did not
Right.
use the math.
Yes.
So this is like a fresh.
Yes. They're the same way
Mhm.
because when you get older,
Yeah.
you don't use it, you use your calculator,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. What you need to do is watch all the film. It'll just be 2 lessons. And I went slower because today I'm just refreshing, so I didn't want to spend 3 hours going
Yes.
over it again. Okay. So you listen to all of that, and then you can tell me. We'll try to meet sometime. And you can tell me what you don't understand,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
And I'll go over it again. All you will see online is that right there.
I see.
You won't see me at all. You'll just see me writing.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'll go slower on that,
Yeah.
and then you can just highlight, like these,
Yeah.
which ones you have a problem with. And a lot of it is, math is the same in any country, except, like I said, for dividing, usually it's a little bit differently, the way that is. But, when you haven't used it, I mean, it's like if I had to try to work a calculus problem, I would have no clue, but I had that, but I haven't used it,
Yeah.
I haven't even ever taught algebra. I've taught like algebra 1 and geometry and algebra 2. And so anything past that, I don't remember how to do. So I'm the same way that you are. And so and that's what this course is to go back over everything, I don't know who the woman is that he was talking about, that was going to make sure that you could get on.
Oh, okay, I know him. I know who
Is
it
her name?
Autumn. Autumn, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know where her office is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you go right now?
Do you have any classes with him
And
yet?
find
Oh, yeah,
her
I church
and
history on
let
Thursday.
her kind of
I've
show
learned
you
to write down
how to
times
go.
and then go
Yes.
back.
Okay.
Yes.
Right
You
down
go do
there.
that while they're taking the test.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. I will write that.
Right. And when you finish all these different
He,
worksheets, these are the answers.
Is he doing
So
open
you
note
check
tests still?
them, Then you'll
Yeah, I think
know
so.
what you
Yeah, he usually does that.
understand.
Yes.
That sounds nice.
Go check with
I
her,
have a
make
harder
sure
time with
you're
his
on
open
every
test.
single class.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
But his open note test, he'll ask questions that's not even in the notes. Like, this doesn't even help you.
Yeah.
see,
You will
history
probably want
is
your
easy for
jacket
me.
every
'cause-
day.
Yes.
We
I have a
freeze in
gift
the
for being
summer
able
and we
to.
usually burn up
I'm in
in the
ADD,
winter.
so when I
It's
read
crazy.
something, I have to read something. But
Sometimes
when it
I'll
does,
bring
I'm able to
free
regurgitate.
coats.
Okay.
You can't.
I like history for that class. He was
Yes,
really-
thank
you.
Hey, it was good meeting you, man.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, now, let's get out a couple sheets of paper. Do you have any? No? Okay. And, you can have as long as you want, and when you finish, you're through for the day, okay? Like I said, I was gonna go into the chapter, but, when you're 2 weeks behind in every class, it's just more than you can handle.
You know, we're gonna need a lot of time to cry after we take this test. That's what it is.
Are we gonna start with?
I can email her because today she's off.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
all right, okay. And then you can just work the ones that you know how to work.
Yes.
Does this book?
It's learn all the term like fraction and division, all kinds of things.
Probably doesn't.
Just leave it.
Okay,
Just
that's the
leave it.
reason
Just
I
leave
did
it.
this with mine.
Okay.
Chapter 1, critical thinking skills.
Okay, I can go online and find something about that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But it will explain it to you if you listen to what I say.
Yes.
But, let's see. If you want to, you can just go, okay, because all they're gonna do is take the test and leave. So you can go and go online and see if there's anything, on there that
Oh,
you
you mean today no lecture?
Yeah, right. Because I'm trying to let you catch up.
Oh, I
Because
see.
otherwise you're gonna get another week behind,
Yeah.
and I know every class is like this.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Right. But, you can just go and work on these and
Okay.
email her
Yeah.
and get you set up in every class.
Oh,
Okay. And then you can take the book and then at the end of the course, just return it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
So that's mean today no lecture.
Right, right.
Okay, I go work on this one.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My brother, thank you for
No problem, man. Hey, remember, I'm next door to you. If you need something, come on.
Sure, I will.
Also, tonight, we have our first CMTI
Yeah.
series, and Joey will mention it again in chapel, I think, but you get 3 points onto your test if you have time to
I'm
come.
not-
Too early there.
I think is it 5? There's
6. 6.
Well, there's food before. Let me
Oh,
look.
there's a food before.
I didn't know anything about this.
But I think I
I'm
remember
gonna
saying.
need these 3 points.
Yeah, it makes 3 seminars, so that will add up about 9 points.
Yeah,
So that's a good thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I
remember
think
she remembered. I remember she mentioned it like 2 weeks ago, but you know, I had a lot of squirrel moments between then and now.
Yeah,
Yes, it said 6, but I thought we were eating before that.
So it'll be in the.
In the auditorium.
We need
Cool.
to RSVP.
No. Make sure they have a front and a back. Okay. Now, if I were you, I would put my answers on the test, but you can work them on the other paper and then just turn the paper in with your.
So I can turn it all in one.
Yeah, just turn it all in. It's freezing in here.
It's kind of cool.
It feels so good.
thank you so much and see you later.
All right.
Yes.
Right. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
I was gonna say this about the temperature, and I'll shut up. My case and Andrew apparently like living in very warm conditions.
Uh-huh.
And I'm very endothermic, and I work outside. I came home the other day, and my temperature on the thermostat is on 90 degrees. I told myself, look, guys, unless you want me to walk around naked, please keep it at 75.